Hey everybody, it's Luigi Scarcelli here. Welcome back to Friday PM. It's the dog days of summer here. We're gonna have a great show. We've been off for a couple of weeks, but we're back and we're excited to be announcing that Down East Christmas 2 is upcoming. So check that out. We're gonna be casting for that. It's gonna be a lot of fun. The first one was a huge hit. But on this show, we're going to have a good friend of mine, Jason Lambert. Good to see you, Jason.
Nice to see you as well.
Who's going to play a couple songs, and we're going to learn a little bit more about Jason as well. Later on the show, we hope to get Michael Paddleford. Michael was on my show before. He's got a show on PMC called Recover Loud. And Michael is a recovering opioid addict. So he's going to talk a little bit about what we just saw in the news today about Matthew Perry and how a lot of these addictions start out at the doctor's office and they end up on the street. So we should hope to have an interesting thing with him and maybe a couple other surprise guests, but we'll let you know later in the show about that. I don't want to bury the lead here, but I've got my friend Jason. Good to see you, Jason.
Likewise.
Shake your hand here, my friend, for the wide shot. So Jason, you are professionally a teacher here
That is
in
correct.
Portland. Yeah. But you're also a musician.
Yes.
A writer as well.
Yes.
How long have you how long have you been an artist in one way or another, writer or musician? A whole life? Or?
Well, I guess I would say that it first started for me when I was probably in high school. I think I really got into music. In the late 80s was a time of great music that was coming out. And I think pop music was really alive at that time. And there's a lot of great bands. And so I really delved into it. Then I discovered the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, and I started writing these lyrics about these girls I had crushes on in my classes. And then I wanted to write songs, but I didn't have an instrument to play. So I went to college up at the University of Maine, and I came back home, and I decided that I wanted to learn how to play guitar. I thought it's either now or never, because I was like 23 years old and I didn't know how to play guitar at all, So I had a guitar that I had gotten for Christmas, and it was sitting around for a couple of years. And so I picked that up and started playing guitar. And you start off with any instrument. I was awful.
Right.
I didn't know how to tune it. And back then, now I got a tuner on my phone.
Yeah.
Back then, you had to go to the Starbird or something, or Daddy's or Buck Dancers and pay $50 for a tuner. So once I got that tuner, that's when things started to turn around. Yeah, because it actually sounded okay.
Yeah.
So it took me about a year to be able to be in of practicing daily and getting the calluses on your fingers. And then about a year after I started playing, I started composing my first songs that I would say that are still, I look back on and say, oh, a couple of those are pretty decent.
Well, so in the 80s, what were, other than the Beatles, and what was the first bands that got you excited back then? You were talking before about some of the rock and rollers.
Yeah, well, I would say in the 80s, like the late 80s, I liked a lot of different things, but it's funny because the first favorite band that I had probably, and I used to think of a favorite band like having a favorite team, like the Red Sox, I root for them, But it was Mr. had a couple tracks, that song Broken Wings, and then Kyrie lays on that one. But then when Def Leppard came out with Hysteria in '87, I really got into that, and so those are some. I mean, that was a couple of them.
Because you still play some of the songs. Jason was at our First Friday event, and you were playing some of those songs, but in a very different way, like Def Leppard. And then nobody knew the song. I go, oh, I know what he's playing. He's just doing it mellowly.
Then I think the other thing too is that there were a lot of great artists like Prince, who back then I took Prince for granted. That he was putting out these great tracks. all the time. And, it was like, oh, Raspberry Beret, that's a cool song. But, now I really can appreciate what he was doing, but I think that era, again, I like Bryan Adams, and
I did too.
Huey Lewis and the
Huey
News.
Lewis,
I mean,
yeah,
those,
right.
some of that, some of that stuff's kind of cheesy. You look back on it, but I mean,
But
at the
it's
same
super
time,
fun,
it was
and
fun.
you could bounce around to it, or also exercise to it,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
a lot of it had a lot of pep to it, especially Huey Lewis.
And I got really into like a classic rock for a while, and kind of like then I was in college. I had a radio show at WMEB up in Orono, and I got into really the alternative rock, Nirvana and that kind of scene, and not so much the Seattle scene, but into alternative rock. Like the Laws was a band I liked a lot, or so then I just kind of disavowed all that stuff I liked in the 80s. But what's great about being an adult and you get older is you can go back to some of that stuff and think, wow, that was some good stuff.
And so getting back to that, when you talk about Prince and also with Def Leppard and kind of what you're talking about with some of the other bands that you liked back then, where you liked a song or two, did that inspire you that both of those artists were people that had, or bands that had several songs? Like you'd listen to the album back to front, and it sounds like that's something you started realizing, oh, an album isn't just a song you like, it's the whole album.
Yeah. So I think that was the trend. I mean, like, Def Leppard's Hysteria was an album that was sold, I don't know, 20 million copies or something. But yeah, I mean, like 5 or 6 of the songs on there. But what always the song that I cover and the song that I like the best even then was Hysteria, the ballad.
Exactly,
was a favorite of mine.
Yep.
But then I mean, then that's when I got into classic rock. That's when I started thinking about albums as full artistic statements rather than just a song here or there.
Well, it's
that's
funny
on there.
how, as we both grew up kind of in the 80s, because we were born in the 70s, was that, all we really knew in the 80s was that, the radio song and the hit. You didn't really know as much about that idea, at least because we were kids, and we didn't have access to, unless maybe if you have your parents' record albums, which most of us probably weren't as interested in. We just wanted a cassette, and hear the song that we liked on the radio.
Well, and that's the thing, you had to spend, it cost like $10-11 to buy the cassette, so I mean, back then, I mean, I don't know, that would probably be a $25-30 now, you know what I mean? So it was, but I mean, I bought a lot of cassettes back in the day.
And I remember that I just had the short attention span as a kid, that I wanted to hear the song that I was told it was the big song. And then the other songs, I felt like if you didn't have the radio telling you it was another good song, you didn't know which ones were. But on albums, same thing with me. I remember, was it Sign of the Times? Was that the one that was
Prince
really
album.
good? That had all those different songs.
It's a double album,
wall-to-wall songs, Def Leppard. So as you get to college, because that's what I was going to ask you a little bit, we'll get to kind of further along about how you create your albums. But I kind of jumped ahead for you, but
that's
so
okay.
Out of college, what were you doing then?
So then I was working, teaching, subbing mostly, and working at part-time at Shaw's for a while. But I always playing music, always writing songs, and I just really enjoyed the process of writing songs, and so I think at that time, right out of college, like alt country was big, so there were a lot of bands that were doing kind of like a alternative rock country thing. I think REM was kind of started some of that. The Replacements are another band. As they got towards the end of their career, they were doing more of that. But those are some of the
kind of like
touchstones.
Almost like Americana.
Americana
Wilco,
stuff. Wilco, huge
Right.
fan of Wilco, especially Uncle Tupelo was a big inspiration.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I did I wrote a lot of early songs, and even still today, a lot of that alt country Americana stuff is still stuff that I do. So that's, I think, with the acoustic stuff. But then, like I said, there's a couple other different things I do. But I started writing songs and just I didn't put together an album of songs. I did a kind of a rock thing. I was playing with a band for a little while, and then I decided to do a solo album. And the first thing that I did came out in I think it was 2010.
Okay.
It was just called Son Lambert, because there's a lot of Jason Lamberts in the world.
Yes.
And so I when I Googled Jason Lambert acoustic music, there was a Jason Lambert in Portland, Oregon, playing acoustic music. And I don't want to compete with that guy. And then I told that story to somebody, and somebody said to me, "Don't you know that everybody has a doppelganger in Portland, Oregon?"
Exactly.
It's
There's
like,
always right.
I changed it to Son Lambert. I put out another album, something called Super Stereo Sale. That was a little more band oriented. And then I started to get into the synth project, which is now 4 albums deep. A 4th one coming out
That's cool.
like the next week or
Well,
so.
because I think we'll talk about that after. We're gonna have Jason play a couple songs very shortly, and we'll come back. We'll talk about more like the here and now. But yeah, I mean, I'm guessing that's more of an opportunity for you to stretch your creative limits with
Yeah.
more interesting things.
And that's exactly it. I think I got a synthesizer to play on, to add like, a little bit of coloring to this acoustic project I was working on. So I got the synthesizer, and then I was like, had been using it just for like little things here and there. And then I learned how to use it a little bit, and then it became kind of dangerous on it. And then I started writing songs about, and I'm very fortunate that I have a friend down in Portsmouth. His name is Mark McElroy, and he has a studio called the Electric Cave.
Okay.
It's right on the west end of Portsmouth, which has now become quite gentrified. But when I first started going down there, it wasn't so much. But he's a good friend, and we have a lot of fun getting together and recording music. And so it started out as like kind of like, oh, I'll do this one like thing, and then like I kept writing songs on the synthesizer. And so that's been like, as far as recorded music for me, that's the last 10 years or so have been really focused on the synthesizer stuff. Although I do have a project in the works with acoustic stuff. Yeah.
Okay. So very shortly, we're going to play a couple songs. What are the songs you're going to be playing for us up front here?
Well, the first couple of songs, one of the songs is called Pieces.
Okay.
So I wrote, it was interesting because I don't buy a lot of guitars. I have 4, I have 2 acoustic, 2 electric. I bought my first Stratocaster way back when in the 90s, mid 90s. But so I had been eyeing this guitar at Buck Dancer's Choice for years. And, I had seen it they have this really great sale every twice a year. And I had seen it there at a really great price. I didn't buy it because it was still expensive. And then finally I just decided, I went in one day, it was in January, it was the depths of January, and I went in there one day and basically I made an offer for the guitar, and which is what the price was, and I bought it, took it home, and the first time I played this guitar, I wrote this song called Pieces.
Okay.
And I think it was a song in my mind, I was writing it about somebody direct, kind of like telling a story about somebody else. But then like the more I played it, it's kind of like, it was kind of just as much about me or anybody. So it's a song, it's kind of about like, things, sometimes life can get rough, but if you keep on plugging away, eventually things, it doesn't stay that way.
Yes.
Yes,
right.
And so then I wrote another song, which is kind of in a similar vein, called Lost. And it's kind of like, the idea is of the song was kind of like you're driving around, you're hanging around all these places that you always are at, and you're in the same places, very familiar places. But sometimes even when you're around these places that are very familiar, you can be lost.
Yes.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah.
And so that's kind of was the concept of that song. So I think those are the first couple songs that I plan to play.
Excellent. So let's get right to those songs. We're going to cut to Jason playing a couple songs. We'll come back. Then we'll talk a little bit about the here and now, what you're doing these days, the synth projects. Jason is a writer, also written a book we're going to talk a little bit more about, kind of a Renaissance man, a man of my time.
I like to create things. You know what I mean?
So, creative guy.
So that's my thing. Is
it's fortuitously it's about growing up in the '80s. So we'll talk a little bit about growing up in the '80s too.
Yeah,
we have that shared in common in Portland. So stick with us. We'll be right back with Jason playing a couple songs. Thanks.
This is called Pieces.
Saturdays you only smile. That's why it seems so out of style. God, it's been while. Got you wondering why things turn out the way they do. So you keep on making an excuse to keep you from being you, keep you from being true. And if you fall to pieces, you put yourself back together. Fall to pieces, well, it don't last forever. Fall to pieces, you put yourself back together. Fall to pieces, well, it don't last. Sunday, well, what a day. Except it didn't turn out that way. Left you with nothing to say, except today is today. Tomorrow you never know which way it's gonna go. So it just goes to show that's what you know. And if you fall to pieces, you put yourself back together. Fall to pieces, well, it don't last forever. Fall to pieces, you put yourself back together. Fall to pieces, well, it don't last forever. Fall to pieces, well, put yourself back together. Fall to pieces, well, it don't last forever. Fall to pieces, you put yourself back together. Fall to pieces, well, it don't last. This next one's called Lost. Driving through this town, you're feeling upside down. Driving through this town, well, how you get around? What's inside of you? Coming and going, rain and snow and sunshine too. Streetlights flashing with passion flowing through. Don't get lost, don't get lost, don't get lost. Don't get lost, don't get lost, don't get lost. Driving through this town, you got your windows down. You're here and there, you're everywhere, but you're nowhere bound. Going slow over country roads, the rain is falling down. In the cul-de-sac, there's no going back. There's only round and round and round. Don't get lost, don't get lost, don't get lost. Don't get lost, don't get lost, don't get lost. So many roads not taken, so many dreams forsaken, so many hearts not aching, so much aching. Don't get lost, Don't get lost, don't get lost, don't get lost. Don't get lost, don't get lost, don't get lost.
Hey, everybody, we're back again. Stay tuned for Michael Paddleford talking to us a little bit about the Matthew Perry incident. We try to get a little topical here and there. We used to be live, as I was telling you before. Now we're not always live, but we're close to it. But I want to thank you again, Jason, for playing those songs. And did they mean anything specifically to you other than kind of what you had said before? Or
No, I think it's one of those things where when you write a song, it's like it can maybe. I always figure like a song is kind of like it's kind of like a moment in time, you know. So even if you are not still in that moment in time, you know, when you play the song, you kind, at least for me, like I try to recapture the feeling of that time.
Yeah.
And that could change over the years. But so the songs that I played, those songs were written a few years ago, but I think they still hold true today in the sense that I think that they're kind of universal in theme. You know, so I think that when you write a song, it's kind of like, I always feel like if you're playing it live, you're kind of projecting, you know, as an actor would project.
Right.
You're telling a story, you know.
Yeah.
So what I've tried to do over the last 10 years or so, or 5 years, really, since the pandemic, I really started thinking more about how to compose a song, is to make things more like direct. You know, so I think in the past my songs were a little bit meandering. Now I try to make them really direct.
Yeah.
So I think that's, you know, so in other words, here's the story. You know what I mean? I'm not going to mess around with the other parts of it.
Yeah. You don't want to try to, sometimes maybe, again, I don't want to speak for you, but that in some of the songs you might think, well, maybe I'll let the listeners come to their own ideas, but sometimes you rather just tell them the story.
Yeah, and let them kind of still figure out what they think I'm trying to say or something like that.
So getting back to kind of the timeline, so you were teaching and you got into doing more synth stuff. Tell us a little bit more about what that entails. And I know the album upcoming, or that you had already done, is Pastels.
That's coming right out.
That's the one that's coming up.
Yeah. So like I said, I really got into writing these synth songs. I think inspired a lot by the 80s, and then when I started doing this project, started listening to a lot of the like Hall & Oates, like Prince, like those like people that wrote great pop music, and we had huge hits. And I really was inspired by that. And again, being very fortunate to have a friend that has a studio and is also an amazing musician, that we could put together these songs and have fun doing it. And I have a cousin that's an amazing bass player, and he'd come up from Massachusetts and lay down bass tracks. So it was kind of like, it was a lot of fun doing it, you know. The unfortunate thing is that I don't have any way to play, at least at this juncture, to play these songs live. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like I kind of put out this music that's out there and is not played live. But
is it possible for us to play a clip on the show that you could send to us?
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
So why don't we do that? I'm spitballing it here, but let's take a quick pause and we'll play a little bit of a song, maybe like a minute or something, so you can hear kind of what you do.
Absolutely.
What would the song be that you'll send to us, and we'll beam it in after?
I'll send you a song called Fly Girl.
So watch Fly Girl, listen to Fly Girl, and then we'll be right back. And then won't be the whole song, but a minute or two or something to flavor of it. We're back here with Jason again. hopefully you had a chance to listen to that. That was called Fly Girl.
Fly Girl.
Fly Girl, very cool. But getting back to the album, in the meanwhile, now that they have an idea of kind of what you mean by that, that was the influences you were talking about?
Yeah. So like this last one is we got most of the basic tracks cut right before the pandemic started.
Yep.
So like what happened was then my friend Mark and I did remote sessions for a while,
Right.
which was really cool actually. It was you know, because here you are in the midst of the pandemic, and and yet we still were managing to make music and have a good time, doing that, and so we put together this album. The songs are short. They're like to the point, and like spent a lot of time getting the sounds right. So the album took about 5 years to complete.
Yes.
And so it's finally at a point where I can get it out there, and it'll be at Bull Moose. Will be on Spotify. It will be Apple Music, YouTube Music, all that stuff. Strange Maine, I always leave copies there. So
Love that place.
so it will be out there. So I hope people check it out, because I'm pretty proud of the end product.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's an interesting thing where maybe upcoming we can do something like we talked about it. Jason's played at least one of the First Friday events so far. We plan on doing another one in September, and maybe we can even do a little bit of a listening.
Yeah,
part
I would
for
love
that
to
or
do
something.
that. Yeah.
That would be cool too. But you haven't lost touch with your acoustic roots. You're still
No.
interested in that a lot. And so, are there other plans coming up for that?
Yeah. So I think one of the things with what the synth projects have helped me do is like, I think the songs that I was writing 5-10 years ago, a lot, like when I listen to them, like they tend to meander,
Yes.
and that's okay. But so what the synth project has helped me do with the acoustic stuff
Yeah.
is make things more direct, like and compact. So rather than kind of get lost in the in the meandering part of it, like kind of coming up with hooks.
Okay.
Because that's what people want to hear.
Right.
They want to hear a hook.
Yeah,
They want to hear
exactly.
something that they can remember and they can listen to, and like, oh yeah. And if the more hooks you can put into a song, whether it be how you phrase vocals, or whether it be the chorus or the chords that you're playing during the chorus, those are the things that I think draw people to your music. So that's something that I've really tried to do.
And when you say, like with Hall and Oates, for example, I'll still listen to their song. Those guys were the king of a lot of hooks.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like Out of Touch. You remember that
Yeah.
song?
Oh yeah.
And that's all big synth and everything.
Yeah.
But it's still, because they've like, okay, it's almost like they've boiled it down,
Yes.
figured it out. Okay, here's what,
Yes.
and they're like, it's an earworm.
Or like,
something.
yes. And that's what I've tried. That's what the synth projects helped me do. And again, having a friend like Mark and Dylan, my cousin, who have played on these recordings, they've helped come up with parts. But that's what I've really been trying to do with my acoustic songs. Is like kind of just be direct, like catchy. Like, how can I phrase this so that it's something that people want to hear again and again and again?
And it actually, I'm sure, makes it's a lot harder, because you don't have all the bells and whistles.
Yeah.
Right. So you have to figure it out, because it's like, how can you do hooks if like a Bob Dylan, can he do a hook? Okay, maybe he can, but it's harder to do.
Yeah.
Because you don't have as many tricks.
Just me.
It's just you and that guitar and a lot of the same chords and things. But that's kind of influenced you as well. What about, I thought we should talk a little bit about this book, because that's kind of an interesting thing. We're going to get a picture of the book to show you right here, right now. And the book is called Sophomore Summer. Is
That's
that
correct?
Yeah. And you can buy this book also at Sherman's Bookstore, Amazon,
Bull Moose,
Bull Moose, right?
Amazon.
They sell it at a lot of places. So first, let's find out how that came about, and then we'll learn about the book. When did you conceptualize this? You're a literature teacher.
Yeah, I teach. 8th grade.
And you find all these teachers are always like, "Well, I'm going to write a book one of these days." You actually went and did it, which is cool. And so, was this something you did actually in the summer when you weren't teaching?
Most of the time, the summers do allow for you to have time where you can just kind of focus on that. So that was definitely part of the time I wrote it. But what I was trying to do is I think I'd written some stuff for a lot of stories, historical fiction, like a lot of different things. But I wanted to create something that I could put out, and like it would be something that everybody could read. Adolescents could read, adults could read, and it was something that would get out there and people would appreciate. So what I tried to do is kind of focus on what it was like to grow up like in Portland in the late 80s,
Right.
you know, and be a part of what that time in space was like. And so I really delved into like those things. I think that Portland was at that time, and tried to capture kind of a little bit who I was at that time. I think the narrator, the character, the main character, the protagonist of the story is probably more confident than I was at that time, because you know, but at the same time, some of those things did happen, some of them didn't. But the bottom line was that I wanted to create something that people who grew up here would appreciate, and I thought also adolescents would appreciate. What I found is that, generally speaking, the people that have reached out to me, and it's been quite a few people have reached out to me and said how much they appreciated reading it, because it took them back to what Portland was like in the late 80s.
Yeah,
so they like, it took them down a trip down memory lane, and that was really great to get that feedback and response.
Well, it's because the people our age, you know, they have kids. We were talking about a mutual, you know, the son of a friend of mine from teaching, and now, you know, they're of our age, and their kids are at that age where, I mean, it's like, it's so crazy because how time goes by. It's literally when we were in the 80s, and I'll speak for Jason here, is like, that's how we saw the 60s. That's how they see the 80s, like this distant, strange time with a lot of weird outfits.
And the
music.
80s never gets old.
No,
it's weird. It's like, it's, you know, a friend of mine, actually, my friend that I record, my friend Mark that I recorded down in Portsmouth, he said it's because that was the last time, like before computers and technology really took over. I mean, that was part of the landscape back then, but it wasn't what it was. You know, when you get into around 2000, people started having cell phones, people started texting, the internet was kind of taken over, and the 80s was that last time
bastion
before
of time.
that.
Well, and also, you know, everybody knows it's like the biggest thing is that after that, everybody could go in their own direction. So it's one of the last times of shared experiences. Whereas you'd look at like our parents' generation, it was like the moon landing or what happened with Kennedy being shot. All these things like that everybody, because there's 3 stations or less, we still had that, but it was right at the end of it. Because by the 90s, there was that internet culture. But I also think that it's like the 80s, I mean, other than like things that happened in the Falkland Islands or things, it doesn't seem like there wasn't really any wars then. There wasn't anything that was, so like the 60s is kind of stuck in an anti-war thing. 80s was just like, you can look back on it light, good times, you know, like Wang Chung, everybody have fun tonight. It's all silly, and so it was almost like bred to be this weird dimension of nostalgia. Versus like the only other one that probably is like that is the 50s. Because you know the 50s has that nostalgia that's just black and white. The 80s is like ultra color. But every other generation always had these like weird other things happening. Whereas the 80s can be a real moment in time that's frozen as just all the pop and the good times and the fun things and stuff. I think we just overlooked also a lot of the bad stuff going on. I mean, there'd be a We Are the World concert here and there. Live Aid. But it wasn't like we weren't looking at it as much. So what else about the book? They can find it at Sherman's.
They can find Sherman's, at Bull Moose, at Amazon. It's you know, it's a very, you know, G-rated. That was part of what my goal was, to accomplish it. And you know, I think that I think if you're interested in reading something or being taken back into the late 80s in Portland, you know, like check it out, because that was my goal, and based on what people have told me, I accomplished it.
You accomplished it. Well, what we're going to do now is we're going to play 2 more songs from you, Jason. Let's find out briefly the names of the songs, a little bit about what they mean to you, and we'll jump right into them.
All right. So first one is a song I wrote called Tupelo, which was written right around the time the pandemic was happening, and like I was just wandering around my yard looking at it. I am fortunate to have like a woods kind of behind my house, and I was kind of like trying to figure out what the different trees were and stuff like that, and the Plant Snap app or whatever kept saying Tupelo, although I don't know how accurate that was, but I was like, Tupelo. Well, I went through Tupelo, Mississippi once years ago, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna write a song about what I was experiencing at that time, like at that moment, like in, you know, when I did that. And then the other one is a song called New Wave, and it's just kind of like a love song, you know, a kind of a sad love song. And New Wave is not necessarily the music. It's more like, you know, when you have feelings, you know, it changes, and so there's these new waves of of feelings, you know, and so that was kind of the idea of that song, you know.
Excellent. Let's play these songs, and I want to thank you so much, Jason, for your
you,
time.
Luigi.
It's great to come down. Check him out. We'll be right back.
Say I had the blues, 100 of the cliches too. Thoughts chased each other round and round like wheels on my VW. Sometimes romance is a hippie trance, leaving you blue all the way through. Sometimes a dance is like a chance, leaving only you. Thinking about you through Tupelo, early morning dew. Thinking about you through Tupelo, wondering what to do. That's true. What's in your rear view? Maybe there's a place out in space where there's room for that too. Maybe things explain, still it remains what you thought you knew. Maybe there's time to find what you got in front of you. Thinking about you through Tupelo, early morning dew. Thinking about you through Tupelo, wondering what to do. Thinking about you through Tupelo, morning dew. Thinking about you through Tupelo, wondering what to do. This one's called New Wave. Missing my eyes upon you. It's true, I'm missing them too. The kind eyes in my high night, deep inside they're blue. They can see through this charade, this grand parade, looking through to a vision of you that you made. It's a new wave. It's a new wave washing over. It's a new got the same colored eyes. We should be playing on the same side. There's this divide inside yourself you hide. What's it like in there? Is it a vision of somewhere where you become aware of everything that's there. It's a new wave washing over. It's a new wave. It's a new wave washing over. It's a new wave. It's a new wave washing over. It's a new wave. It's a new wave washing over. It's a new wave.
Hey, everybody, we're back. I want to thank my first guest, Jason Lambert. Great job, great songs. Check him out. He's everywhere. He's a good guy. But right now, I'm here. Usually we don't do kind of topical news on Friday PM. It's more of a interviewing guests and things locally. But there was a story that came about that was so interesting that it struck me as saying, I should talk to a gentleman I had on my show before named Michael Paddleford. And on my early shows on Friday PM, we had Michael on, and he talked to us about some issues he had with addiction and so on and so forth. We'll expand on that. But today I just seen, it's a Thursday, it's a mid-August. The story was about the famous Friends actor, Matthew Perry, and he had passed away from drug overdose, ketamine specifically. And basically the story was that a lot of doctors were prescribing all these things. So without further ado, let me introduce you, Michael. It's good to see you. Thank you for being here.
Yes, good to see you again, Luigi.
Yeah, and we'll talk to Michael more about the show, but just to touch on the topic, let's take a quick look. I'm going to go find a clip of what's going on. We'll play that. We'll talk a little bit about it, and then we'll talk more with Michael. So let's jump to that, then we'll come right back.
New tragic details from Matthew Perry's death investigation are being uncovered. Authorities are now revealing how the actor's personal assistant allegedly played a role in his death. According to the Department of Justice, Kenneth Iwamasa admitted to injecting the friends along with multiple doses of ketamine without any prior medical training on October 29th, the day Matthew was found in a hot tub at his Los Angeles home. Prosecutors shared an August 15th press release that Kenneth has pled guilty to one count of conspiracy to distribute ketamine, causing death. However, Matthew's former assistant is just one of 5 people who have been charged in connection to the actor's death, which a medical examiner previously determined to have been caused by, quote, the acute effects of ketamine in a drowning-related accident. Other defendants include 41-year-old Jasveen Sangha, who authorities call the ketamine queen, 54-year-old Eric Fleming, 42-year-old Dr. Salvador Plasencia, and 54-year-old Dr. Mark Chavez. Authorities accused Dr. Plasencia of working with Dr. Chavez, who previously operated a ketamine clinic in late September 2023 to obtain the drug to sell to Matthew. Writing in an alleged text message, I wonder how much this moron will pay. The DOJ alleges that Dr. Plasencia then supplied ketamine to the actor and his assistant, quote, outside the usual course of professional practice and without a legitimate medical purpose. Prosecutors also accused the other 2 defendants, Eric and Jasveen, of supplying Matthew's assistant with additional ketamine in October 2023, which he then allegedly used to inject his boss. U.S. Attorney for the Central District of California, Martin Estrada, says in an August 15th statement that those charged in the Star's case, quote, took advantage of Mr. Perry's addiction issues to enrich themselves. Continuing, drug dealers selling dangerous substances are gambling with other people's lives over greed. This case, along with our many other prosecutions of drug dealers who cause death, send a clear message that we will hold drug dealers accountable for the deaths they cause. E-News has reached out to attorneys for all 5 of the defendants, but has not yet heard back.
So we're back here with Michael. So Michael, as you saw, Matthew Perry, famous guy. We all grew up with him. One of the friends, I mean, it was probably very traumatic for viewers. I know I have a cousin of mine that got her through a lot of dark times, that show. So here's a guy super beloved. it just really came out. It didn't come out of nowhere because he'd been struggling with addiction forever. But what was kind of I just wanted to ask you some kind of what you thought about all of it.
Yeah. So, like you said, we grew up with him, and for 10 years, they had that show going, and of course, it was pretty public about his addiction problems since the show. And just from the story, I was reading that today as well, and the similarities between him and I is, and a lot of people, is our addiction started with our doctor being our drug dealer. Unfortunately, because of his status, because of his bank account, he was able to keep a doctor and as his dealer. And a doctor's supposed to do no harm, but here's the situation where the doctor was greedy, and they cared more about the money than they did the patient, and it's a tragedy.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what we were talking about a little bit before we started the stream here was that, a lot of addicts, and that's the weirdest part about all of it is it's like from your story, which we'll touch on in a moment, it, it becomes unsustainable to keep going to the doctor. And so then you have to go to the streets. And I think they said he may have actually gotten some of his stuff from the streets towards the end of it. And I remember the DA today had said something about it always starts from the doctor and ends on the streets. And it's like, so, and then I see guys like Michael Jackson, Elvis, these famous guys that they were able to continue, or Rush Limbaugh had a lot of issues where doctor shopping and OxyContin and all these things. And so I think it's, without going too far into that, can you recount again? Because for most of the viewers, they haven't seen the episode we did was so many years ago, but kind of what your story was. It's a very crazy story, but yeah.
Yeah. So it was back in 2001, a slip and fall injury at work. I happened to herniate 6 discs in my back. And at 25 years old, there was really no course of action to correct the problem. I was too young for surgery. They wouldn't do it. So, this was later on in the opiate epidemic. Everybody knew that it was an issue, but they were still prescribing. Some of them were. Other doctors had a problem with it. But, I found a doctor who was willing to give me all that I wanted. And so in the beginning, my doctor was my dealer. I quickly was prescribed high doses of OxyContin, the fentanyl patches, all of that. So unlike Matthew Perry, later on, they get the pressure from the feds about prescribing too many. They're always being watched. So it's almost seems like they were looking for reasons to discharge patients. And that's what happened with me. And once I was discharged, I didn't have a place to get them, even though I still needed those meds. So I went to the streets to buy what I could. And after several years of being able to get what I needed, there weren't pills on the streets anymore, which led me to buying heroin. And then, the story of fentanyl replacing the heroin on the streets, that whole change happened. And thankfully, early in that changeover is when I decided to get some help. In November 3rd, 2018 is when I finally gave up, and I went into treatment, and I've been in recovery ever since.
So, and that leads me to a couple of thoughts again, where it's a little bit about the celebrities, but it's actually more about the regular people, and even to the level of the people who we see out on the streets. When you were in the throes of your addiction, also the idea of rehabilitation wasn't really as easily attainable either. So even had you wanted it, it probably would have been harder to figure that out.
Well, one thing I always say is, when I was using on the streets, recovery was like the Freemasons to me.
Yeah.
I didn't know anybody that was in it. I didn't know where the meetings were, and I didn't know how to become a member, because nobody talked about it. And anybody that did happen to talk about recovery, they weren't in recovery because I was buying or doing drugs with them. If they were in my circle, then they weren't they weren't doing the right things.
One of the people you're hanging around with. Yeah.
Right.
Well, and also though, I mean, when you're at that level of physical addiction, you do need some probably medical treatment. You can't just,
Yeah.
AA sounds good, on paper, but that's where a lot of that stuff. And do you find like that's what's going on now with a lot of the people we see out on the streets? They're at that lowest level? Because I saw something that many of the people out there are addicted.
Yeah. So, back in the 30s and 40s, when these AA and NA programs were being developed and used and being very successful, those weren't the same substances that are on the streets today.
Right.
They didn't have the fentanyl. They didn't have the xylazine, which are hundreds of times stronger and more addictive than, the heroin that was on the streets. So, when we consider that, the difficulty in cold turkey, working and sustainably for long periods of time, it's pretty difficult. So back even in 2018, the stigma associated with medication assisted treatments was pretty high. Today, we know that, some of those medications, they're the best chance at somebody finding recovery and being able to live without drugs. So that's how I found recovery myself. And it's been a great almost 6 years for me.
Yeah, I mean, I know that even when I was a kid, I mean, I grew up mostly here in Maine, and the idea and I lived in Chicago, and that you'd hear about methadone clinics, and that was always thought of as super sketchy people, because obviously you're going to have it's not going to be the Ritz-Carlton or something. That's not where but it seems like it's hopefully that's a thing that stigma we'll figure out ways to overcome that stigma, because I don't think the people that go are people who are on the toughest times of their lives, but it's now it's things like methadone. What are aren't there a lot of other drugs that I saw?
So I went the route of Suboxone.
Yep.
There's also Subutex. And those contain a blocker. So when I'm on my Suboxone, if I were to try to use a drug, I'm not going to get high off it because there's a blocker in there. Methadone is it doesn't contain the blocker. Some of the stigma associated with methadone, it comes from the fact that people see them going in for treatment, and they assume if they're getting better, if they're in treatment, that they shouldn't be doing drugs. The way the methadone program works is you don't go in there and stop using drugs because you're on methadone. It takes time for them to build the medication up in their system before they can jump off with the substances from the street. So, a lot of them, they're still using, and, they're getting better. They're working towards getting better. And if somebody's going there every single day, sometimes at 5 a.m, some people from Aroostook County here, before we had a methadone clinic in Presque Isle, they were driving 3 hours to Bangor. And you have to go every morning for your medication, so there's a level of commitment that people don't understand. And, they're just looking at, the kind of people, the way they dress, the way they act. And, that stigma, it's tough. And Aroostook County is one of those places where stigma is pretty rampant. So,
yeah, and I think it's one of those things where you have to be able to put yourself in that other person's shoes.
Yeah,
because I mean, it's from what
and that's so hard for somebody who doesn't know what it's like to use.
Right. Yeah.
Addiction is such. People can say that they're addicted to a hobby, but how many people would sell their wife to pay for that hobby? And those are things that do happen. Even worse things happen for the drugs. But it's since I started my show, I've got my show Recover Loud that plays on PMC as well. Recently, I've been buying a lot of gear, new equipment, and trying to make my show better. And some people could say that I'm addicted to buying, to producing the show, but I can tell you, I would never, sell myself,
Yeah.
to buy a new camera.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly the same thing that I say because I used to have a little bit of an issue with my drinking, and it's like a lot of my hobbies, or again like even with drinking coffee,
Mhm.
or I don't smoke cigarettes anymore, but that's one of the things in AA, and it's like, well, somebody say, well, that's still an addiction, and you go, yeah, well, guess what? You don't crash your car up. You don't wake
Right.
up the next morning feeling like, what did I do the night before? I got in trouble. I remember I was in a rehab myself in my early 20s, and this one guy said, he goes, every time that I drank, I didn't get in trouble, but every time I got in trouble, I was drinking.
Yeah.
And it's like that was his theory because he was always getting in trouble. So it's like, yeah, there's good times, bad times. But yes, I mean that's the whole thing about it. It always leads down to, I mean,
Yeah.
I think there's only one other addiction that I can think of that's not with that chemical that's so harmful is gambling,
Yeah.
because gambling you'll do to your amount of money
Yeah.
where it could really take a lot of money, but as an ongoing thing, it's difficult. That's kind of what I want to talk to you about is you have a new season coming out of your show.
Yeah. Yeah. And just to touch on that for a second, Luigi, so addiction is defined as, a behavior um, that somebody is not willing to stop doing despite the consequences that they receive.
Yep.
People can say they're addicted to their phones, because they can't put it down. But if I were to hold my phone 24 hours a day, what are the consequences?
Right.
They're not as serious. So the need to put my phone down 4 hours a day isn't as strong. But not being willing to put down a substance, despite crashing my vehicle, despite losing my wife and children, despite losing my house, despite going to prison, that's really what addiction's about. Um, but yeah, at the end of this month, August 31st, I'm going to be starting the 5th season of Recover Loud. Started it back in 2021, just before Christmas. And, it was just a crazy idea, actually. And it was something that I thought if 50 of my friends told me that that was cool,
Yeah.
I might have done a couple shows. But putting it on YouTube, within the first week, it was over 500 views. I was receiving emails and messages from, all over the country. And it was really such a major impact to the recovery community, that I felt like I had to keep going. And originally I was doing it right there at PMC. The first season was produced and filmed all right there. For the second season, I had moved back home to Aroostook County, and now I produce it, edit it, and put it out all from my office here in the county. And it's been a great ride. Learning how to edit and put things together, and doing all this stuff on my own. It's been pretty fun.
Yeah, and I mean, I think when I first met you at PMC and you were first on the show, it was probably almost 3 years ago. I might be
Yeah.
wrong,
Yep.
but yeah,
Yep.
because it was in
December
the fall.
2021.
Yeah, and it
Yep.
was like because it'll be the fall of 2024. I bet it was the fall of 2021.
Yep.
Yeah, right when I started my show. And so the interesting thing that was still early on in your recovery. I mean, you had only been, clean and sober for a few years, right? Was that?
Yeah. So I'm coming up in November. I'm coming up on 6 years, November 3rd. And so I would have been 3 years sober at that point. And
Which isn't
it
a lot
was
of time it's not a lot of time in the big world of things, right?
right. And you can look at it that way.
Yeah, I
But,
know, right.
but when you consider how serious the drugs
I know,
are,
exactly right. That
being
is a
away
lot.
from them for a week is really, really something
Exactly. Yeah.
special. But back then I was working. I had started my Facebook group, Recovery on the Road,
Yep.
where I was supporting people from all over the world. I went and I took the recovery coach class, and then I became registered and I started working as a recovery coach back then. So the show kind of went hand in hand with what I was doing. Since then, I was one of the first recovery coaches to be certified in the state of Maine. I decided to go back to college at the same time. after I celebrated my 5 years in recovery, 3 days later, I received my bachelor's degree in criminal justice
Yeah.
back last November.
Yeah.
And just recently, my daughter announced she was pregnant with my first grandchild. And I started thinking, how can we prevent kids from getting into substances? So I actually transitioned from working in recovery to working in prevention. So now in Aroostook County, I work as a community educator, going into the area schools, and I teach substance use prevention to middle and high school kids.
Interesting. Okay. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think that it's another thing that I had remembered about you knew a lot about it, and I think you helped in some ways, or at least were very aware of it, of getting more of the needles. People wasn't necessarily needles, but it was getting more of the ability to not have people overdose.
Yeah. So one of the things I started doing once I became a recovery coach is I also connected with some of the area um, Narcan distributors.
Exactly.
And so I started training and distributing Narcan to people. When I came back home to Aroostook County a couple of years ago, I was actually contacted by the Maine Department of Education. There was a law that was passed where schools were allowed to carry it and administer it in case of an overdose within their schools. And I actually had the opportunity to train 14 schools in the county and get Narcan into the schools, help them, implement their policies, and that was pretty special.
Yeah. And it's so my kind of final couple questions. We want to get some plugs in for you as well. But where do you see kind of I mean, Maine we're having a hard time with a lot of it. I mean, it seems like, but is it? Is it better? Is it worse? I mean, is what you see when you're living in Portland? I don't know. What's your good picture from up above?
Yeah, so it's two different Maines, and people have said that for years about so many different topics. When we consider substance use treatment, we can say the same thing because the resources are in southern Maine. The acceptance and availability of the resources in southern Maine is phenomenal. Northern Maine, we don't have a lot. Um, you know, um, Compared to some of the larger cities down south, uh, who have 7 or 8 different Suboxone prescribers, providers available. We have 2, and that's for an area 60 miles in all directions. And not everybody can get to that one place to get the medication. We have one methadone clinic. We have a third recovery center actually just opened up in Fort Kent, which is 60 miles away from the one that's here in Caribou. So it's just, there's so much area, so many people who suffer. And the winters up here are hard. People are shut in most of the winter. And we lack the connection that people in Southern Maine can get. And we always say that connection is the opposite of addiction. So without that, people struggle. And, on top of that, we have a lot of stigma. People up here don't accept that somebody can be a good person even. A lot of the population up here, they're still upset with their cousin who robbed them 15 years ago while he was, using that dope, that they can't forgive anybody. And, hopefully the things that I do, I try every day. One of the main reasons I started my show was to help fight stigma. I recover loud so that other people can see that it's possible.
Yeah.
Here's somebody that was, I was down and out. I had traded my car for two bags of dope. I lost my wife and kids at least once, due to the drugs. And nothing was helping me stop. So when I left the county and I started getting help, and I kept thinking about my friends back here who knew nothing of recovery. So when I was living in Auburn, in southern Maine, I decided I was going to recover loud enough that they could hear me and know that recovery is possible. So that's the premise of the show. And while we're fighting stigma, if we can provide somebody with a potential pathway of recovery that they might be able to use to help save lives, then I'm all for it. So looking forward to the fifth season. Yeah, this season we're going to start including people from around the country. Last season we had 12 stations from Maine to Missouri pick up the show, reaching a potential 300,000 households. So I want to start including some of the people from across the country who are out there doing the work, advocating for recovery, helping to change the laws, because Maine's pretty progressive when it comes to the substance use laws. And we're kind of setting the bar for a lot of places. And it's great to see the people who were out there. I think it was last year in Texas, they pushed to get fentanyl test strips legalized because you couldn't carry those around. And that's something that people on the street needed to know what they were taking. To know that there was a risk of them overdosing and dying. Because that fentanyl was found in substances that, across the board. So just seeing that happening around the country, and the people who are putting in the work, I want to help celebrate them and get their message out, and kind of let everybody else know what it's like in other places.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's always a kind of an interesting thing, because there's so much the fentanyl, nobody has a clue of what levels and things. So it's kind of like the Narcan type of thing. And it's, and it is kind of funny that there was people in Maine that they were, I think Paul LePage, even when he was the kind of the strict governor, was like, well, we don't want to, pat these people on the back or encourage it or whatever. Yeah. And it's like, well, that's not, we're past that level.
Oh, exactly. I think the last time he was running for governor, he said the first time they get Narcan, it should be free. And then anytime after that, it should be charged to them. Who's going to check that out before they give somebody, the life-saving medication that they need?
Right.
It's, I understand money and cost and all that, but, how about, considering human life,
right,
and, potential. And I like to tell people that, the only time that we have a 0% chance of recovery is after a fatal overdose.
Well, so one last question, and because I know you got other things you got to do, but do you see any benefit in the kind of the more legalization parts of it? Like, it seems to me that in Maine, and maybe it's just me, but I noticed that they've had more of a legalization of marijuana and things like that in places that have higher opioid things, because at the very least you're less likely to overdose on getting really high on weed, and that might be a mitigating thing, or other things like that. Or what do we think about that in the recovery community?
So there have been studies within the last few years since marijuana has been legalized, which one of the greatest benefits of legalization of marijuana is the availability of studies. Because we had plenty of people saying, oh yeah, that's going to work, but we can actually study that stuff now. And one thing that they were finding is marijuana, it works well for opiate use disorder, to get people through the withdrawals. I know plenty of people who use marijuana maintenance. I'm a proponent for marijuana maintenance. And it's, what's funny is working in prevention now, a lot of the prevention folks are against the marijuana laws, because but when we're talking prevention, we're talking about the youth. And regardless of the benefits of marijuana for an adult in a situation, it's not something that the youth should be doing. And until their brains are fully developed, until they're able to handle and understand the effects and benefits and all of that, then they shouldn't be using it. So it's a tightrope walk that I do, and it's something that I can see it from both sides. But again, regardless of the benefits for adults, youth, we have to make sure that they don't have access to it, and that we keep it out of their hands.
Well, and I look at it almost similar to the debate of cigarettes and vaping, which is
Yeah.
the idea that it's like, you know, when you got somebody who's already on opioids, you know, it's not like you got to worry about what marijuana is going to do. They've already passed that Rubicon. But
Yeah.
at the same time, same with cigarette smokers going backwards to vaping. But
Yeah.
yes, for youth, you don't want them to start on vaping
Exactly.
and graduate to smoking. And the same with, you don't want people to start. But there's actually been a lot of studies that haven't really proven that that marijuana is this big gateway drug to.
Right.
Yeah, that's
Well,
what I heard.
and me, in all the work that I've done and all this, the trainings I've taken and the work and the stories I've listened to, you know, the biggest gateway to drugs for a person is trauma.
Yeah, exactly. That's
You know?
I mean, and those people who are the trauma, or you know, if somebody tries to say, well, they're just somebody that wants to try everything to see. It's not like the marijuana, you know what I mean? They're going to be they'll jump to whatever they can get their hands on.
Yeah.
I don't think that the gateway thing has probably ever been proven, where it's like, oh, you'll start with you know, having a cigarette, and then the next thing you're on, you know, crack cocaine. It's
Yeah.
more like, yeah, if you're needing to find some escape from all the issues and all that, and that's what, you know, you and I have both seen throughout, is like most of the people had a lot of pain in their lives. You know,
Yeah.
usually there's issues that it's if you can't address them, you end up having to just numb out, and that
Yeah.
fulfills. Yeah. So,
Absolutely.
yep, go ahead.
I was going to say, you know, my first substance was alcohol at age 12. I was drinking.
Yep.
It was a family function kind of thing. You know, I grew up poor, but my mother's side of the family, they lived on the lake, and, you know, they would have weekend parties with their friends. They were 10 years older than me, and, you know, they were drinking. So I saw that as, you know, a status symbol. You know, my
Yep.
parents didn't drink.
Yep.
You know, but I wanted to live on the lake. I wanted to have fun. I wanted to have these parties with all my friends. So
Yep.
drinking was what I thought I had to do.
Yeah,
You
I've
know?
seen that a lot, and that is where it starts, with that need to fit in.
Yep.
And you know, and we've seen that with smoking cigarettes too. Is like it was everywhere on television. It was so much more socially
Yeah.
encouraged. And as things kind of change, and the views change, then hopefully the youth changes too. But I agree. I mean, we've got to get the word out. So where can people catch your show, just before we
Yeah.
lose you here? Yep.
So of course, the show will be available on PMC Channel 5.
Yep.
I believe it'll be Thursday nights. I don't know the time slot. But also on Facebook at Recover Loud Maine, as well as my YouTube channel at Recover Loud.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Check his show out. We'll be right back after this to close up the show. Thanks again. Thank you. Thanks, Mike.
Yes, thanks,
Appreciate it.
Luigi.
All right, take care. Bye-bye. Thanks.
In the dazzling realm of politics, where every move is scrutinized and every word is weighed, there's a hidden truth lurking behind the facade of power. Beyond the sharp suits and rehearsed smiles, what if the true rulers of our world are not quite what they seem? What if those we trust to lead are, in reality, something far more sinister? Picture this: the charismatic leaders you see on television, their voices smooth and persuasive, their eyes often hidden behind dark sunglasses. But these aren't just symbols of secrecy, they're masks concealing an unsettling reality. Behind closed doors, when the lights dim and the cameras are off, their true forms emerge. Reptilian aliens, their scales shimmering in the shadows, reveal themselves. They're not merely influencing policies, they're weaving a complex web of deception. As they walk the corridors of power, every gesture, every speech, is a carefully crafted illusion designed to manipulate and control. Their true nature slips through occasionally, like a brief, chilling glimpse behind a mask. A glimpse that says, "We are not who you think we are." Their presence is felt not just in the halls of government but in the very fabric of our daily lives. Through the grand speeches and behind closed meetings, their influence is pervasive. They shape our reality, steering our beliefs and decisions from the shadows. So the next time you watch a leader speak or see a policy announced, remember, there's a deeper truth beneath the surface. The true rulers of our world, hidden in plain sight, are not human at all. They are reptilian beings, manipulating the strings of our reality. In the end, the scales of deception are everywhere. They are the silent architects of our world's grand illusion.
Hey folks, let's dive right into a topic that's as hot as it is unsettling. Why are so many right-wing men in politics and entertainment acting like creeps? First, let's get one thing straight. This isn't about painting all right-wingers with a broad brush, but there's a disturbing pattern worth examining. From politicians to celebrities, these men often make headlines for all the wrong reasons. Take, for instance, Donald Trump. The locker room talk tapes disparaging women as nasty, and the countless allegations of inappropriate behavior. It's not just Trump, though. Remember when Fox News had to let go of Bill O'Reilly after multiple sexual harassment claims? And let's not forget Matt Gaetz, who's facing allegations of sexual misconduct. So why are they like this? A big part of it is the culture they thrive in. Right-wing circles often promote hypermasculinity, where being tough and dominant is celebrated. This mindset can easily cross into toxic masculinity, where disrespecting women becomes a way to assert power. Misogynistic statements aren't just slips of the tongue, they're often calculated. Think about Rush Limbaugh calling women feminazis. This kind of language isn't just offensive, it's a way to undermine and silence women. It creates an environment where being a creep isn't just tolerated, it's almost expected. But why does this behavior persist? It's partly because their supporters often turn a blind eye or even cheer them on. When Trump made those derogatory remarks about women, there was outrage, sure, but there were also people who dismissed it as boys being boys. This kind of leniency emboldens them to continue their behavior. Another layer to this is the power dynamics at play. These men often hold significant power and influence, making it difficult for victims to speak out. The fear of retaliation or being discredited is very real. When powerful men face few consequences, it sends a message that their behavior is acceptable. So, what can we do about it? First, call out misogyny whenever and wherever you see it. Don't let these statements slide. Second, support policies and leaders who promote equality and respect. And lastly, believe and support survivors who come forward with their stories. In conclusion, the creepy behavior of some right-wing men in politics and entertainment isn't just a series of isolated incidents. It's a symptom of a larger cultural issue that needs to be addressed. By shining a light on this behavior and holding these men accountable, we can make strides toward a more respectful and equitable society. Thanks for tuning in. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into the issues that matter. Until next time, stay informed and stay vigilant.
As the year 2034 dawned, the world paused to remember a figure whose life was as controversial as it was impactful. Donald John Trump, once the 45th President of the United States, had passed away at the age of 88. The tale of his final years is a journey through an era marked by turmoil, transformation, and an extraordinary final act. In the summer of 2024, Donald Trump's influence reached a critical juncture. His provocative remarks outside the Chicago Democratic Convention were more than just incendiary rhetoric, they were the spark for orchestrated chaos. Behind the scenes, Trump was alleged to have bribed Antifa to incite riots, amplifying the unrest and further polarizing the nation. As the nation grappled with the ensuing chaos, Trump faced mounting legal troubles, including a significant indictment related to campaign contributions from Egypt dating back to 2016. The weight of these charges, coupled with numerous pending convictions, seemed insurmountable. At this critical juncture, Melania Trump made a surprising move. She announced her separation from Donald, citing a desire for freedom. "I want the penthouse, not the White House," she declared, choosing a new life alongside the dashing Fabio. With his political career faltering and facing public disgrace, Trump orchestrated a dramatic exit. Declaring a faked illness, He withdrew from the race at the last moment, pleading with judges and prosecutors to drop all charges and commute his remaining sentences. The presidential election concluded with a decisive victory for Kamala Harris, who triumphed over the replacement candidate, Ron DeSantis. As Harris prepared for her second term, Trump retreated to New York, claiming his entire political escapade had been an elaborate prank, a hidden Democrat all along. Yet, the high society of New York remained skeptical. Trump's grand claim of being a Democrat savior did little to sway his former allies. Discredited and disillusioned, Trump's final chapter led him to an unexpected exile. In a twist of fate, Trump settled on Epstein Island, where he joined his erstwhile ally, Vladimir Putin. The island, now a sanctuary for these two exiled figures, became a curious backdrop to their twilight years. Amid the sunny beaches, Trump and Putin lived out their days in a serene and unprecedented retirement. The life of Donald Trump, once a beacon of controversy and spectacle, concluded in a manner as extraordinary as his public persona. A legacy intertwined with drama, deception, and an enduring mystery, his final days are a testament to the strange and unpredictable nature of history.
In a land where honor and darkness clash, a once peaceful village lies in ruins, scorched by the flames of invasion. Amidst the chaos, a lone samurai named Ryo emerges from the shadows, burdened with the weight of a shattered world. Driven by a quest for vengeance and justice, Ryo vows to restore balance and reclaim the honor that has been stolen from his people. As Ryo draws his blade, its mystical glow reflects his determination and skill. He faces a relentless enemy, Cage, a dark and enigmatic figure whose power threatens to plunge the land into eternal darkness. Cage challenges Ryo, confident in his superiority and the inevitable defeat of the warrior. Surrender or face oblivion, Cage taunts, but Ryo's resolve remains unshaken. Allies join Ryo in his battle against the encroaching darkness. Sora, a master archer with unparalleled precision, and Yume, a fierce warrior with a hidden past, fight alongside him. United by their shared purpose, they stand as a formidable force against the shadow that looms over their world. Together, they confront the dark forces, determined to overcome the odds and bring light back to their land. Through intense battles and moments of fierce training, Ryo and his allies prepare for the ultimate showdown with Cage. Their journey is marked by extraordinary courage and unwavering determination as they face overwhelming challenges. In a dramatic and climactic confrontation, Ryo's final attack against Cage will determine the fate of their world. Witness the epic journey of a samurai who defies fate and battles against the darkness that threatens to consume everything. Samurai Legend, Rise of the Shadow is coming soon to theaters near you. Prepare for an unforgettable adventure where honor, courage, and destiny collide.
In the heart of Brazil, a seemingly innocent experiment has spiraled into a nightmare. Welcome to Zombie Zoo. Brazil, where a government initiative meant to push the boundaries of science has gone catastrophically wrong. What was intended as a breakthrough in animal behavior research has instead unleashed a horde of the fiercest, most relentless zombies ever seen. Inside the confines of the once pristine zoo, the animals have transformed into unstoppable creatures of the night. With every growl and snap, they reveal their insatiable hunger for chaos. The government claims that these horrors are the result of ancient voodoo rites, but the truth is far more sinister. As the public begins to uncover the reality behind these monstrosities, the nation teeters on the brink of civil unrest. Will the zombie animals find a way to escape their confines, bringing their reign of terror to the streets? Can the government maintain its grip on the truth, or will the outbreak of chaos expose their darkest secrets? Prepare yourself for a chilling ride through the apocalypse in Zombie Zoo, Brazil, where fear is not just a feeling but a reality. Witness the horror, experience the chaos, and brace yourself for a story that promises to leave you on the edge of your seat.
When Barack Obama burst onto the national stage in 2008, he represented a transformative wave of change. His charisma, historic candidacy, and ability to captivate a diverse audience set him apart. Today, as Kamala Harris steps into the spotlight, many wonder if she can embody that same level of excitement and influence. Can she be Obama 2.0? Kamala Harris has already made history as the first woman, Black, and South Asian Vice President of the United States. Her groundbreaking achievements echo Obama's own barrier-breaking campaign. Both leaders have captured the attention and imagination of a younger, more diverse electorate eager for change. In 2008, Obama rallied support from a new generation of voters, energized by his vision of hope and change. Similarly, Harris draws on her multicultural identity and progressive agenda to galvanize younger voters and influential figures in the music and Hollywood communities. Much like Obama faced an older establishment opponent in John McCain, Harris is up against an older candidate whose relevance is waning. In 2008, McCain's running mate was Sarah Palin, a divisive figure with limited appeal to younger voters. Today, Trump's choice of J.D. Vance as his vice presidential pick mirrors this dynamic. Both Obama and Harris have faced, or will face, competition from vice presidential candidates that struggle to connect with the younger base. Palin and Vance represent the polarizing figures that seem out of touch with the evolving political landscape. Obama's campaign was a beacon of hope and inclusivity, uniting a diverse coalition under a common vision. Harris has the opportunity to build on this legacy, leveraging her unique background and progressive platform to inspire and mobilize. The question remains, can Kamala Harris capture the same magic that made Obama a symbol of change? With her historic role, dynamic personality, and potential to energize key demographics, Harris has the foundation to be a powerful force in American politics. While the road ahead is challenging, the parallels between Obama and Harris are undeniable. As she charts her path forward, the potential for Harris to become the next beacon of transformative leadership is very much alive. Can she be Obama 2.0? Only time will tell.
In this election, we each face a question. What kind of country do we want to live in?
Want to thank our guests, Jason Lambert, Michael Paddleford. We had a couple surprises in there as well. Stick with us. Watch every week. We'll be back this fall. Downey's Christmas 2, watch for that also. First Friday's upcoming. Watch for the open mic concerts. So have a great night. Thanks again for tuning in. Good night.
Know you try, girl, you sting. Bad girl, well now, keep your eyes on the prize, girl. You're so fly. You're so fly.